Hi, this story is a true story about the struggle and responsibility of a family head in living a difficult life to meet the burden of his family's living expenses. Kris Gardner struggles tirelessly even though various trials keep coming and going, by sticking to a hope and Kris' determination with the principle that tomorrow can be past better. In addition to the success story, this story will open your eyes about how a father struggles when hope, tears unite in every struggle. Stay away from crowds first, put on the headset, think carefully, and here it is, Pursuit of Happiness 2006. In San Francisco 1981, the story begins one morning where there are busy people who will start their routines, including when Kris Gardner was seen delivering a child named Christopher to be entrusted to a daycare not far from his house. Kris Gardner is a father who is diligently optimistic and has big dreams for his family. With a background in sales, at the beginning of his marriage he also ventured to spend almost all of his savings money to become a distributor of a portable bone scanner. His days he also have to be willing to go back and forth to every hospital to offer the tool, but unfortunately many doctors at the hospital refuse it, because the scanner is not really needed and the price of the tool that Kris sells is quite expensive. Maybe the opportunity was still at another hospital. He finally met Linda, his wife, who was working in a laundry, to ask her to pick up her child in turn because it was noon and until late afternoon, he intended to go to another city to offer his tools again. But unfortunately again Kris had to be disappointed because the doctor there also refused to buy. Actually there was no need to sell a lot to pay for house rent and meet daily needs per month, enough with 2 tools sold, then everything will be covered, but at a very expensive price. It makes it difficult for Kris to sell them. None of them have been sold this month, plus his car at that time got a ticket and he became very confused about it. When he returned home between meals, Linda asked about the tax bill. Because he didn't have the money and his scanner hadn't been sold yet, Kris also intended to postpone the bill until next month. Linda, who was really tired, especially when she had to go back to work late, of course they will be disappointed to hear that, meaning their tax bill will be even bigger because of the added fines. But Kris still says that everything will be fine, and he also reassures that he will continue to try to find money so that it can be paid off as soon as possible. In the face of his confusion, Kris was seen playing his son's Rubik, while listening to TV reporting about the crisis that was hitting his country. The country's economic situation had an effect on his business, and he could only hope that everything would return to normal, his business would run smoothly and his dream of making his family happy can be realized. The next day when Kris returned to sell, he also saw a man driving a luxury car down in front of him. As if without a burden, Kris then asked where he worked. The man replied that he worked at a stock brokerage, and didn't need to go to college to do the job. He just needed to be good at playing numbers and skilled at interacting with other people. Kris briefly looked at those who were there. They looked happy, as if they were living without any burden. It was sad when he questioned why he had different fates, and was not like those who were there. Long story short, the next day, Kris told Linda his plan that he would try to find a vacancy at the stockbroker's office this afternoon, but it seemed that Linda didn't believe in Kris' abilities and instead made fun of him. Kris was offended here, and an argument ensued there. Linda suggested that Kris should focus on selling his scanner instead of wasting time looking for an uncertain job, especially next week they have to pay rent for a house that is 3 months in arrears to cover the daily expenses. Kris, who continues to be an outlet, can only reveal that he himself has tried his best, but his wife doesn't want to know and insists that Kris can quickly sell his scanner. Arrived at a stock office that said that they were opening vacancies. Because at that time bringing a scanner into the office was not possible, so he finally took the risk to entrust it to a busker who was there, and sure enough, when he was in an interview across the street, it looks like the busker is carrying his scanner. Seeing that he hastily ended the meeting, armed with a piece of application paper, he immediately ran as hard as he could to chase after him. Too bad the busker had already entered the train, so he couldn't help but Kris had to give up his scanner. In the end he had to go home disappointed. Plus it was written on the sheet that out of 10 people who registered only one person was accepted. He is aware that for such a large company, only the best people apply, while he is just an ordinary high school graduate, but Kris is not someone who gives up easily. No matter how small the opportunity, he will take it and try to get it, and the next day, according to the advice from the office yesterday's branch, Kris then went to the head office. There he also met an HRD named Jay, kindly immediately gave his application and hoped to be interviewed immediately, but Jay, who was a busy person, only took the application, and said that if the application was suitable, he would be called. Day after day that always passed without change, made Linda feel more irritated. Kris Troper's birthday, which should be celebrated together happily, Linda actually seemed to harbor her disappointment. Kris apparently realized this, and he also asked Linda not to act like that. Linda emotionally revealed that she was bored and tired from when she was pregnant with Kris Troper. Every day Kris only boasted that everything would be fine. Kris, who realized that this was indeed the case, he could only lament everything. 1 month later, when the Kris was about to ask for his proposal, he accidentally saw Jay, who was in a hurry to leave. Realizing that he was indeed a busy person, Kris finally pretended that he too was going to where Jay was going, on a trip. Kris continued to invite Jay to chat, but it seemed that Jay actually seemed busy with his Rubik's game. To get his attention, Kris then said that he could solve the Rubik, and sure enough, after going through struggles and hard work, Kris was finally able to finish the Rubik, just when the car he was traveling in reached its destination. And when he was going home, Kris realized that the money would not be enough to pay for the taxi fare, so Kris acted recklessly, and when he had the opportunity he ran away from the taxi, instead of getting rid of Kris' problem. Instead he was unlucky when he got into a train, his hand was suddenly caught by the door, and had to lose the tool there again. On the way home, Kris then called his wife, to ask how his son was doing. Linda, who had run out of patience, got angry again and thought Kris was an irresponsible father, because she really couldn't stand it. Linda finally decided to leave the house with her child, not wanting to go home. Lost the people he cares about, he rushed back home, and sure enough, when he got home there was no one, even all their clothes were seen, all taken away. When Kris was confused, the phone rang and it turned out to be a call from Jay. He also asked Kris to come in for an interview. It should be happy news for him, but because this is the current situation, Kris can only be silent and confused. He must do. The next day Kris came to the daycare, and met Linda there. Kris emotionally said that Linda should never take her child again. Linda herself, who really didn't want to care, just avoided her and said that all this happened because Kris was unable to make his family happy. Did not want to return his son was taken by Linda. He too that afternoon immediately picked up Christopher to be brought to his house. At night suddenly the landlord came to collect the rent, and if it wasn't paid the next day Kris had to leave the place, because later the room would be painted before the new occupants came in. Kris, who still didn't have the money to pay it, tried to ask for a favor so that he and his son could still live there, and the landlord finally gave him a week's extra time, on the condition that Kris would replace the job assignment which would later paint the house he occupied. The night passed, and after dropping his son off at daycare, Kris began to paint his house. Just a few walls were finished. He suddenly heard a knock on the door, and it turned out that they were the police who charged his car ticket that had not been paid. At the police station, Kris again asking for leniency, because he was only able to pay part of it. But the officer there revealed that everything had to be paid off, and if not, Kris had to go to jail, and at 9 o'clock tomorrow he was only allowed to go home. Hearing this, of course, Kris was shocked, and became emotional, especially this afternoon he had to pick up his son, and tomorrow at 10:00 you have to meet with Jay for an interview. Rules are rules. Finally, Kris is very disappointed to have to accept all that and to pick up his son. He also has no other choice, other than asking for Linda's help. Kris and Linda basically love each other, and they both love the one and only Delicious. It's just because of the burden and crush the unresolved household economy also makes them have to often have disagreements and end up in this way. When he was allowed to go home, and the time for the interview call was running out, he rushed out and immediately ran to Jay's office. When he got there, he saw everyone looking so neat, in suits and ties. In contrast to Kris, who looked unconvincing, shabby clothes and also full of paint stains everywhere. Resigned to whatever the outcome will be, he immediately started a conversation, and honestly, if he was released from prison, because he couldn't pay the ticket, the HRD there initially doubted, but after various questions and Kris there was able to convincingly, they became very attracted to Kris, who was honest and hard-working. Long story short, the interview was over, and Kris was given the opportunity to train there for 6 months. One thing that did not meet his expectations, in that training he did not get a penny, and that meant Kris had to be able to at least sell 1 scanner per month, to cover his need. Her life. That day Kris returned to his house and continued the rest of his work, until late in the afternoon Linda brought her child, because she was tired of their household quarrels and the economic burden that was getting more and more difficult. Linda decided to go to New York to work at her sister's restaurant, realizing that it will be very busy, and she knows how much Kris loves her child. Linda finally gives up her child with Kris. Tonight Kris really feels very depressed with all the circumstances that befell him. He can only look at his son with a sense of heartlessness when the child he loves so much has to share the bitterness of life. The next day Kris packed up his things, and moved to a cheap inn, unable to leave his child anymore. Kris was forced to take his son to work, went around every hospital in the hope that his remaining scanner machine could be sold, and luckily that day there was a doctor who were interested and bought his scanner. The proceeds from the sale of the scanner could at least be sufficient for a month's needs, and finally, after leaving his child in a regular daycare center, he started his first day of training, along with several other training employees. They were also required to compete in getting as many clients as possible, because later, out of all the existing candidates, there will only be one person who can be accepted for work. They are also there given a guidebook and also given directions on how to lobby people to buy shares in their company. After that work, at 4 p.m. Kris continued to pick up his son, and so he lived the following days on the sidelines of his work offering shares. Sometimes he feels a little unappreciated, when he is often told to buy drinks or food by the supervisor there, but he is also patient in living it, and hopes that everything he does can be a positive value for his work. 2 months have passed, and at this time Kris still has not been able to reach the target, because he is only able to work for 6 hours, because in the afternoon he has to pick up his son. To anticipate this, he also plans to take the target of a CEO of a large company, even though in fact to lobby a CEO class it wasn't easy, When he called, it turned out that the CEO named Walter was not busy, and he immediately told Kris to go to his office. Unfortunately, there are always obstacles. When he was about to leave, suddenly the training supervisor told Kris to park his car. The traffic jams and the parking lot was difficult, making Kris lose quite a lot of time, and finally he had to give up his chance, because Walter rushed off for another event. One day when Kris and his son went around offering scanners, he also took the time to meet Walter. There Kris immediately apologized for the delay yesterday, and hoped that Walter could give him another chance at another time, to rediscuss the problem of cooperation. Walter, who at that time wanted to watch football game, then asked Kris to come along and watch it together. When he got there, Kris tried to express his desire about the collaboration, but unfortunately, because he just met, Walter said he had to think about it first and suggested that business matters be discussed later. 4 months have passed. Now he is a little calm because all of his scanners have been successfully sold, but again problems arise again. When he gets a tax bill and forcibly the bill takes almost all the money in his account, so he can survive living with the remaining 2 months of his training period. Of course, the money that was collected was enough to trigger Kris to think harder again. One day while at the playground, he accidentally saw his scanner, which had been lost at the station, was taken by a madman. With a little difficulty he finally managed to reclaim his scanner, and Kris immediately cleaned the tool to try to sell it again. Unfortunately, when offered and tried it, the device didn't work, so the doctor didn't buy it. It didn't stop there. The trials happened again when he came home. There he found that his belongings had been put outside, and his room had been locked. It was none other than Kris was in arrears for rent. Kris, who was confused about where to go, finally decided to take his son to the station. In the midst of the confusion, to comfort his son, Kris tried to lie and said that the scanner was a time machine, which if the button was pressed they would immediately go to a place where there are dinosaurs. Not only that, because Kris also helped the dramatization is that there will be a lot of dinosaurs in that place, so they too have to take shelter in a toilet. He only does that so they can sleep there, so that their children can be protected from the cold night. With toilet paper on the ground, Kris also has to stay up all night, all so that no one could get in. The next day, because he had no more money, Kris was forced to go to a homeless shelter, just to get a bed and free food there. For the sake of his son, Kris was even willing to argue until he got into an argument with someone who overtook the queue. That night, when everyone asleep, Kris took the time to try to repair his scanner machine, and also went back to studying the stock brokerage book, although he had to struggle because of the lack of light in the place. That's how Kris currently lives his days, because the shelter is rationed every day, so he also has to go home at 5 o'clock to quickly get back in line, so he can get a place to sleep. It's not uncommon in his days. There are always trials that befall, such as when Kris was going home from work, one of his bosses borrowed money because his wallet was left behind. After seeing that there were only a few dollars in his wallet, because he was in a hurry and didn't feel well, he finally lent him $5, even though he had saved the money for good. Bought spare parts for his scanner machine. Finally, because it was really tight, he also donated his blood, in order to get a little money to repair the machine. And when he fixed it, luckily the machine was running again and he was happy. He could calm down a bit, at least can breathe easy for the next month. With that money, he could again feel the warmth of a bed in a simple inn. As usual, he always spends his days with maximum effort, in doing all his work, meeting with important people and trying to offer shares for sale in his office. Long story short, arrived on the last day of training, Kris was then called to the HRD room. There they, including Jay, praised for the hard work and also the results that Kris had done during his training, and lastly they also said that tomorrow is the first day for Kris to work in that office. Hearing this, Kris seemed unable to contain his feelings of emotion. The hope he had wanted the most so far finally came true. Kris was so very happy. Finally he could feel what it was like to be happy. Like what he saw 1 year ago on everyone's face who was in front of the office. In a hurry he immediately met his son and hugged him tightly, releasing all his emotions while sharing his happiness. After starting his career in that office, and in '87 Kris built his own financial services company, which named Gardner Rich, and in 2006 he sold all his shares for hundreds of billions, and until now he works as a motivator and speaker in various countries. This film teaches us that never give up to reach a desire, even though difficulties and trials keep coming our way. Stay strong and keep trying and fighting as best we can, because an effort will never betray the results. Hopefully it can be a motivation as well as inspiration for all of you guys. Thank you for watching this video until the end and waiting for your comments. See you again in the next world movie video.